Hey everybody, my name's Yohan. That's my buddy Darcy St. Louis.
Hey.
We have a podcast together called We Are in Space. This is the first episode of the podcast. Let me tell you a little something about We Are in Space before we get started with something that me, Darcy, and another buddy, Brandon Price, thought of and put together. And we want to talk to different kind of people with interesting jobs and just get to know those kind of people, get to know what they do and how they do it, how they got there. So essentially, that's what the podcast is about. We're in space. We also do other stuff like music. We do design as well, which will eventually be coming. You can follow us at Brandon Price. Will be putting something down there. And so today's actually the first episode of our podcast called We're in Space. So today we are in space with a 3D designer slash 3D printer, Arthur Hobden.
Nice
How you doing, Artie?
to be on the program with you guys. I'm doing great.
Oh, that's great. Thank you for
Awesome.
thank you for hanging out with a bunch of dummies, little apes.
Oh, we're all dummies at the end of the day,
You know what
my
I mean?
friend. I'm finding
Yeah.
more discrepancies in my character every day than I'm finding strengths.
Well, it's more like we're just trying to learn, every day from different people, and we're trying to get knowledge and spread that knowledge and spread art and spread music. And everybody, with the crazy times happening right now, everybody has to be, come together as one. And I think the best way for that to happen is through music, it's through art, and it's through conversation and discourse. And, so essentially that's what We're in Space is going to be all about, Artie. But today we are going to be talking about 3D printing, 3D design, the world of the future
Yeah.
of 3D printing. So, yeah, let's give us the lowdown of what this world's about and what you do.
3D printing is it was a big sort of turn phrase in 2010, I'd say, when it sort of blew up, sort of like a bubble. Everyone wanted to be a part of 3D printing. It sort of hit the market, and then a bunch of patents expired. And once that happened, little companies like MakerBot and these desktop 3D printers could start finally taking this technology for themselves and release it on the market for low budget entry-level printers. But really, 3D printing goes back to the 90s, to the 80s even. Like, there was some pretty crazy stuff happening in high labs back then that were 3D printing at that level. It just took so long for the industry to develop to the point where we could hear about it. But it really started with, like, I'd say, like 2008, 2010, when the public finally sort of caught on and the patents were released and a bunch of sort of hobby level printers flooded the market, which is probably what you guys are familiar with.
Wow, yeah, that's how I was introduced to it, through you, actually. Now, where did you said it kind of commercialized in what, 2008, 2009, right?
Yeah.
When did this technology actually start? Who started this technology? Where did it come from? Who thought of it and said, you know what, we can 3D print like this, and this is going to be it?
I couldn't honestly give you a name. There isn't necessarily one name for it. Like, really, the identities that I'm familiar with and that most people are familiar with are like the companies that have come out. So like MakerBot, Markforged, Stratasys, these big companies, they sort of define the face of printing, to my mind, more so than any individual or sort of, outfit would have done.
Interesting.
Yeah, so, and like the most famous one is MakerBot, because they came out with like wood kit printers that you would assemble yourself and sort of jig, slot and fit. They're very, very rudimentary, but people could build them for super cheap and sort of enabled a DIY maker culture of young entrepreneurs who finally had the opportunity to make 3D things in space. So It really hopped on. Some people would have a CNC in their garage, one in half, 1 in 100.
Cool.
But at this point, 1 in 10 can have printers.
Okay. So
Yeah,
yeah,
sorry,
sorry, Darcy.
Johan. Just since we're on the topic of the history of it, it seems to me that it has like just as an outsider, aesthetically, it seems similar to like what tool and die of like the '80s and '90s was. Would you say that 3D printing has roots in that, or would you say it has roots in something else?
Tool and die is one of the main industries that it does serve today, which is funny enough. It came, I believe, from like a need for molding applications, for casting applications. It came in a need for advanced prototyping. So like the pipeline that it serves, it actually doesn't replace any part of one industry. Right now, it's complementing every industry in key aspects of their bottlenecking production. So, for example, you want to go and produce something, and you want to have a final prototype to actually have what it feels before you go to market to be absolutely sure. So you actually engage with your Chinese suppliers. They actually fabricate and machine these giant molds, and then all you get. Oh no, there we go. And then all you get at the end of it all is, one part from a $50,000 mold, and it took you 3 months to get that part. So with 3D printing, you've taken that whole process and months of waiting, and then there's a mistake, and there's months and months, and then the machining. There's a whole bunch of costs associated with that turnaround in design. 3D
Right.
printing really helps you narrow that down to just like within 3 days, you can have a white model in your hand. Within a week,
Woo!
you can have revisions, and within at any point in the production, you can just replace a model file and keep going with no loss of, financial burden.
Makes sense.
Yeah, but tool and die too, especially like I was saying, sorry earlier, was that it
No,
does come a lot into that because before you had
absolutely.
to use CNC, you had to use like large machines to carve out these custom shapes, which were very consuming and expensive. And now you can just print out a piece of plastic overnight, and it's the same thing, way lighter, way safer.
How crazy is it that just not that long ago that we had to go through that? I mean, I'm sure we still go through that process today in many other countries who can't afford 3D printers, like massive 3D printers, to do a lot of things, right? But how crazy is it that it it still happens, but it happened, but now we have
But it's
this.
fun. We have it, but it has just been introduced, and like I'm still like in my time working at a 3D printer reseller. I would go into factories and qualify technology, qualify their process to see how we could help, see how we could justify the ROE, the return on investment for a printer purchase. Half the
Right.
time, we're walking into like high end like boot companies or like
Wow.
very very common fashion labels, like big names that you would come to expect, where their design philosophy and implementation is literally drawings on PDFs sent back and forth to China. And there's no
Okay.
CAD, there's no 3D modeling, there's no documentation. It's just sketches and talking to people, which is so inefficient. But like you still see it to this day. The adoption of these new techniques is like going to be a good decade, 2 decades of process progress.
Wow. Wow. That's one a lot of information. uh, but yeah, I mean, it's so interesting to see because what you can create today at half the speed of what you did, just a couple of years back is mind blowing. Um, what's the coolest thing that you have ever designed, Arthur? A little sex doll or something like that?
Oh. Oh man, I've worked on so many different things. I have a website for my work, and then, like I have a bunch of different genres for like film and props. I've done jewelry design. I've done medical design, PCB enclosures, 3D printed trophies, woodworking designs, welded tables, lots of rendering for all of those processes. So I really love the genre because it's just so open. That really is the key to it. Like I've worked on, probably the coolest thing I've worked on would be like props and film, like the famous Star Trek Discovery that just came out. I was a part of some of the 3D printing design for that film. That was years ago.
No
Oh, no
shit.
way.
That's
Yeah.
amazing.
And
Okay.
like, yeah, and then the Expanse as well was also one that they had 3D printed badges that were faux metal, that they couldn't have metal
Right.
obviously for fight scenes, and then like
That's
dummy
sick.
casted guns and stuff like that they would come to us for. And
Wow.
then, yeah, and then like even cosplay, if you're doing cosplay, like someone would 3D
I knew
scan,
it.
an Iron Man figurine or something, and they're like, I want a full CAD of this so that I can make a
Right.
8 foot tall model or something, or just stuff like that where it's really outside of the, engineering. Like, this is an application for a production line, as opposed to this is actually a very creative problem solving idea that no one else wants to tackle. That's just a lot of fun.
Great. That's pretty cool, because in my mind, which is a dirty, dirty mind.
Oh man, if you want to talk about some dirty projects.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
Come on, let's talk about the dirty projects. Fuck
man, there was a bachelorette party that had to design coxicles. So
Woo!
yeah, like the negative impression for a popsicle that was in the shape of a cock, kind of thing.
Did you use your penis?
There was more of me in that project than I care to admit. I'll just say that.
Heyo,
ladies.
But there's crazy ones. There's a few others. I'm sure, like, I'm probably violating all my MDAs ever talking about any of this. But as long as I don't say any names or companies, I should.
Already, ain't nobody.
Mick Jagger.
Already, I'll tell you right now, ain't nobody listening to this. So you don't worry, my friend.
You can't say that on your first episode. You're just doing.
Ouch, dude.
It's our first episode. Ain't nobody watching this right now.
There's reruns, dude. What are you talking about? People go back in time and watch the first episode.
This?
I am. Watching it right now.
I'm watching it right now.
Live.
Live. Jeez. Artie, how long have you been doing 3D printing? How do you get into it? Where do you start? Did you go to school for it specifically? What was the, let's say for our viewers and listeners, if they want to get into this industry, what's the best way to tackle that and head on?
Oh man, I got into 3D printing from the University of Alberta when I took their design degree. I'm an industrial designer, so that essentially means I'm savvy about industrial processes, but I use a designer and an artistic methodology to help people, start from scratch, sketch models or notes on paper or some sort of napkin drawing, like they want to go to the next level. I'm the guy who comes in. So it's an artistic engineering role, which is great. So 3D printing is fantastic for that, because it allows you to ideate to 3D with nothing in between, as opposed to having to, all right, I have to build a prototype. This first prototype's not going to be what the first one looks. The end result's going to be, but it needs to be made for something else. So you design for a bunch of other stuff. So 3D printing for me, it just lets you do a lot of fun things. Like around my house, everything, there's so many little 3D prints and knickknacks around here. Like from, for example, I had a problem where my phone, I'd be doing dinner and trying to listen to the radio on my phone, couldn't. And so I ended up 3D printing a little gramophone for my
I've
phone.
seen that. I've seen that.
Where it just plugs in.
Yeah.
And it literally works. It works great. All the way down to
I'm proof that it works, because I was there. I approve of this message that a small little 3D printer can help you with all your household needs. Everything, whatever you need. Eventually, we'll be able to 3D print, people, robots and stuff like that to help us.
I made a present for my parents, which was like a sailboat. So it's
cool.
Yeah.
Look at that thing.
So you can really have some fun with what you're doing, and it's just a creative outlet at that point. Once you become savvy with it, my brother printed some masks for his family, for my family in COVID, kind of thing, adapters. So once you have one, you can really just sort of start applying it, and it's so new that anything's possible right now.
Well, that is, I remember you and I created this little, I'm sure everybody knows by now, but I'm a smoker. I smoke marijuana. And me and Arthur, I don't know if
that's
I told
horrible.
you this, Darcy. Me and Arthur designed this. What was it, Arthur? It was like a little egg, which was made out of silicone. I have it over here somewhere. I'll get it later, and I'll post it up. To kind of store your weed. So your weed, your papers, your grinder. We have this little socket where you can put the grinder in. Do you remember that, Artie? That was our first little project
cool.
Together.
We 3D printed. We were casting in silicone, and he wanted to cast a rubber pill with a thread, so you could put your weed and your stuff together, so it was rubbery and squishy.
I see what you're saying.
So in order to make that, we had to make a mold, and then we decided to 3D print the mold. And so I ended up like printing the mold, getting it together, getting pour spouts and drain vents all printed in, and the quantities. Took it to a mold guy. He poured it with me, and we like wrestled the parts out and cleaned the
Yeah.
mold out. Yeah, it was fun, and it worked, right?
I mean, obviously, I'm not a product designer. It was just a little stupid monkey thought that came to my head. But yeah, it kind of, to some degree, it stores my grinder. It stores at least a half ounce of weed. It stores my papers, right?
Yeah. But having that conversation between two people, like, does
Right.
this work? Can we make it better? Would it is
Well, I can think of a
effective?
million different things that like people would just kind of flock to, right? Or like just little tiny things that you wouldn't think you need, and then you need all of a sudden, like the back to your remote, or just small things like that, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
An
100%.
adapter from a Nikon camera to a Kodak stand or something.
Oh yeah,
Well,
even just like a tripod or just something to hold your phone, like even your just little stuff like that, right? I mean,
Yeah.
one of the questions I did want to ask you though is doing a little bit of my like just awful internet research. I was kind of looking at the consumer 3D printers, and there's two different kinds as far as I can tell. There's types where you have to have digital documentation and that you have to feed into it like software wise, but there is a separate kind of consumer 3D printer where you can actually scan something small enough. I was just wondering which ones do you work with?
I'm not quite sure I understand what two types you're referring to. Are you referring to like open systems versus closed systems where manufacturers prevent you from using anyone else's material?
That might be it. I mean, again, just a layman. I might have gotten some bad information, but from what I
Okay.
understood, there was just the YouTube video that was explaining it to me was telling me that there was a consumer 3D printer that you can buy where you have to go on a certain website, download PDFs, and those are the ones that you get to have, or you torrent things legally, illegally, whatever. But there are like other 3D printers where it has like a separate piece where it just flat out scans actual small objects.
I'm not. Well, I'd say there's a ton of different technologies out there. Like I could go through a bunch of acronyms, like FDM, SLS, SLA, DLP, MJF. Like there's tons of different processes. Yeah, exactly. WTF is the acronym for it all.
Okay, so there's lots more research to do then.
Essentially, there are like the closest thing I was thinking of is yes, some manufacturers will prevent you from buying anyone else's material except theirs. So they microchip the canister, so you can't actually just put something off the market into your printer, which I don't personally.
Protected.
Yeah, I don't personally like it. It is definitely for engineers and people who need to guarantee where their material comes from for engineering certification or something. You can't just have any wacko designing and producing plastic, I guess. But
that makes sense on an industrial level, I'd say, but on a consumer level, I'd think like
it's a little snobby on the consumer level. I would agree.
It's almost like saying a guitar, but these are like a couple chords we're not letting you play. Like
yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's a new form of making art, as far as I'm concerned, right? So the idea that you're limiting it.
There's a lot of that. Like for example, one of the high level printers that prints in full color multi materials in one shot is called the J750, and the younger brother of it is the J735, and the younger brother has a build tray that's reduced by like 40%. Well, the difference between a J735 and a J750 is literally a software upgrade. It's the same print tray. It's the same technology. It's hardware one for each one. It's just they software locked the print bed so that you couldn't use 40% of it, which I think is you have to pay a bunch of money to have that unlocked. And so there's stuff like that in the printing industry, which they try and guarantee their income because there's so few and far between. There's such little game right now in the market. But
it sounds like it's still like the Wild West as far as the industry is concerned. Like there's not a lot you can do to protect, or some industries are overprotected. The law hasn't caught up with it, so like consumers don't really get the freedom with the product that they really like are craving. I mean, I feel like there's a lot of pros and cons to both sides, but it must be exhilarating kind of being on the frontier of the industry.
Oh, it is, yeah, and I really feel that because like I've written college material as a freelancer for 3D printing courses, and I was like 24 or 25 when that happened. Like that doesn't happen to anyone. And like I taught 3D printing concepts at a college too, just for a semester. Like there's no real person who's been there in the industry for as long. Really, like it's again, it picks up right around the time I left university, which I've been thankful for. Um, but like in terms of how 3D printing works, there's a bunch of different kinds. So the hobby level stuff is like a hot glue gun. You'll take a plastic and bead out a shape and then drop down the bed, bead down a shape, drop it again, drop it again, drop it again. You sort of build your shape, right?
Right.
So that's like extrusion based. There's also powder based. So you have a big tub of powder, very, very, very fine powder, and then you sinter a whole profile across the top, and then you pour new powder over that, and then you sinter your next profile. So it's like, metal powder printing is sort of that kind of thing where you're binding with lasers. And then there's also the same thing with resin. So it's a liquid printer and you're using light to draw a profile across the surface and curing that profile before dropping and drawing another. So each process has, different material opportunities open up, different restrictions open up with each one. They all fall into a specific industry, like dental and high-res medical equipment.
Okay, that makes a little more sense to me because as I was kind of thinking there, like when I see when I see something like this and everybody's using different materials, it kind of speaks to me as like we don't really know what we're doing yet. We're still trying things. We don't know if this works. This guy likes how this material kind of holds up. So it's good. So the fact that it's kind of used for different things in different industries kind of makes a little bit of sense too. But I'm sure you kind of get that from time to time where just certain materials don't work as well for certain things, and then you probably have to convince. I don't know whether you work on a contract basis or whether you work for a big industry or how you do it, but I'm sure you've run into a couple brick walls with again when industries are in their infancy.
Yeah, exactly. And like I was a part of a sales pipeline, so we had to qualify technology and applications. So like they're like, we have this problem, we don't know how to solve it, and if we can prove to them that the printer can solve it, then we make a sale. So half the time it's me going through our materials and going, okay, which material has the requirements needed for this load or this stress, or like this part is going to be submerged in grease and it's going to have water, so it can't be porous, and then this one's going to be out in the sun, or this one needs to have a torsion strength of that. So right then and there, you're like whittling down processes, manufacturing types, what printer, what material, to try and meet that demand in the industry. So there's hundreds of materials, there's tons of different processes at this point, and virtually any color too if you get down to it. It's just a matter of how much you want to pay.
Well, yeah, it is expensive, right? Like because the technology is so new, and resources are so short.
Yeah. So 3D printing for me is a great industry because it's just a creative one-for-one representation. You can go straight from the creative drawing board to print, which is awesome. What I see in the future with 3D printing, which is exciting, I don't know if you guys want to do like a Google screen show of like the Google image search, but if you look up generative design with 3D printing,
I'm checking that out right now.
Yeah, so that is a really cool technology where, as a designer, of course, I have to design a part, and for a specific material and process, it has to have all the factors in it. So that's my job. But now they're coming up with generative design where you give that problem to a computer, and then the math and the computation solves the shape. What is the most optimum shape? What's the least amount of material? What's your stress factor? All while not obeying traditional manufacturing processes. Wow. Because 3D printing allows you to do that now. You don't have to account for drafts. You don't have to account for undercuts. You don't have to account for sheet metal thickness. You don't have to account for rotary radius or any of the.
It's just already there.
It's just 3D printing is just, you can do anything. Any shape is available. So you give that problem to a computer, and the generative output of the generated design often looks like, squirrel pelvises, crazy skeletons, anatomical structures. Like it's mirroring nature in a super scary way, in the sense that like, the universal laws that created the physical universe of ourselves, are coming full circle, even when we give that problem to a simulation to churn out parts. So it's a really interesting idea wherein, you would have these, candle, like melted wax kind of structures for the insides of a spaceship, because it's a one-piece print. There's no assembly, there's no parts, everything's integrated, all your circuitry is integrated, all of your hardware and your lining is just printed in a one-off piece on the inside. Far future from now, machines will be doing that for us, and we won't even need to design what we're looking at.
There's a lot to unpack there.
It's an insane amount, yeah. So anything can be applied to it at that point. So
Well, just the learning aspect is really like just kind of twisting my brain here. Like, I don't know. I'm just thinking of the other, like, I don't know. We like to think of technology as independent and individual components sometimes, but the idea that like a 3D printer could be attached to something else that's learning, printing off things it's observing or whatever is being like, yeah, again, just kind of a lot to mull over. The
yeah,
fact that this
yeah.
might be going on somewhere and probably is.
It is, yeah, and it totally is. Like, imagine like UAV drones for the military being printed as one-off pieces, and like there's no ability to disassemble them. You know, they'll print a shape of a drone, stop it halfway, embed all of their circuitry, and then seal that inside the rest of the print. And so you can't take it apart, you can't reuse it, recycle it, take it, and learn from it. You know, from the enemy. Once it's down, it's destroyed. Once you've cut into it, it's gone. Like, so they're already finding uses for it already, like right now.
No limit to the imagination.
Yeah, a really good one is if you look up a 3D printed Bugatti brake pad
Holy
project.
fuck.
Yeah, so that was so imagine a brake pad, you know, and they've reduced that assembly down to like 2 parts, and it looks like it's the most outrageous 3D printed part I've ever seen
I'm
in terms of
actually
the
looking at it
architecture.
right now.
Yeah, and
So
they put it
I'm
through
picturing the
test.
whole caliper. Is it just the brake
Yeah,
pads or is it
it's
okay?
the whole caliper design.
Oh my god.
Wow.
Yeah, and
It
they
looks
put it through the
insane.
test. They put it through, you know, the simulations, and it works. And it's, you know, using half the material. It's got 4 times the safety factor. It's like 3 times lighter, and it uses 3 parts as a set of instead of a huge assembly. Like, it's just crazy
yeah.
what they're saving.
Now, when you say it works, how many times did they go through like, well, for something like this, I guess in a car, how many times do you
They
think
actually
they
show
go
you the
through this
video.
process?
They show you the video of like what they do to it to tear it down.
Right.
Yeah. But
So-
I don't know like what the specifics are, of course, but like just in terms of what's possible, this is what they're doing. I feel like high-end manufacturing and design of the future. Like, you know, in 10 years from now, I feel like, you know, NASCAR, you know, BMW, really high-end like cars and manufacturing will start to take on these printed components that look like crazy skeleton pieces, you know, just because it's available to them. But maybe we will see it in, you know, 15 years from now.
Wow, that's that's super cool, because what I think of the future of 3D printing would also be, I'm sure they're all already doing it right now. I did read a couple of things. 3D printing body parts like lungs and hearts and, you know, cartilages and,
Yeah.
and even bones to that extent, which is pretty cool because wow, we fucking we live in a we live in a generation where, you know, nothing would be able to wear out, and your brain and your nervous system would be the only thing that you won't be able to 3D print. Hey, I don't even know. It could be, you know, in the future that you could be able to, you know, capture
Biological
your
printing.
And
well, yeah, biological printing for like brains, but then you'd be able to capture someone's consciousness before you reprint a brain, because that's still, you still need those memories. You're not a different person, right? Because
that's
if
a
you,
Star Trek Atomizer, right?
Is it?
Yeah, where they deconstruct you on one side and take a copy of the information and just rebuild you on the other. They don't actually like take your body; they just destroy you on one end and rebuild you on the other.
Yohan, he built the USS Enterprise. You got to take this man's word for it.
Darcy, this guy.
When you see the trailer and there's all those dudes welding the US, he's one of them.
Yeah.
He's one of the welders in the USS Enterprise. Yeah, he also does Star Wars movies, but, you know, on the side he's a Trekkie. You know.
So the one thing that you mentioned earlier that I wanted to is just the applications and the possibility of the future. See, this is something me and Yohan always kind of get into it back and forth about, because he'll always kind of speculate about the future, and then I'll always kind of say something like, we don't know what the future is going to hold, like, just because there's the unknown. Like, before this, we were talking about Mars travel, and let me tell you, the future of 3D printing didn't like factor into it at all, but I guarantee that that's going to like have probably a bigger impact than we can possibly imagine. So I mean, like the impacts of the unknown unknowns. So when you're saying like the applications and the NASCAR, I'm just thinking of like what NASCAR might be, that it might have, like, there's so many different angles to come from it. At I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, in terms of what it can affect.
Well, consequences of what you're doing, right? At the end of the day, and the effect of, So, what do you want to use it for? What are you going to use it for? Are you going to use it for the betterment of humanity? Or are you going to be,
Well, yeah. So the far-reaching implications in terms of broader philosophy on our economy would be an end of supply and demand economics. So you don't need to have a mass manufactured 20,000 units ready to get your savings back to make a profit for demand that may or may not show up. So that whole idea would go out the window. You would have even your distribution chains would switch. Imagine instead of having a mail office or a post office or a FedEx office, you're going to one of these buildings and they have a bunch of printers, and you've ordered something on Amazon. That Amazon order got sent to a printer nearby. You go down and pick it up next day from a bin because it printed overnight for you. You could have that in your home. You could have that at a FedEx location. So that's already happening. UPS has a 3D printing farm of about 250 machines doing stuff like that, where it's like a centralized fab location. So that would be like a really cool sort of far-reaching idea. And other areas as well for 3D printing would be, like for space travel, especially on-demand parts. You don't need some of the Navy cruisers I know have printers on board. They just print their replacement parts. They don't need a warehouse of extra parts anymore. So, and if you go to the moon, or Mars, you need to work with the materials you have there. So being able to use like high-powered laser sintering to take the sand of the moon or the dust of the moon, being able to sinter it into glass-based domes or structures, that would be a form of a 3D printer. Being able to take raw material and to extrude it into structures. That would be one. 3D printing replacement organs is on the way. It's kind of cool. It's fundamentally some of the the simple structures of the body you can do. Essentially, you're printing in a protein. Like just a protein material that is consumable by your cells, and then you'll take a culture of your cells and put it in that structure and let it incubate for like 8 months. And by the time that's done, the thing's been grown into, consumed, and you're left with the structure of cells of your own for a larynx or a kidney, for example.
I feel like China's already working on it.
Oh, everyone's working on it. Yeah. One of the biggest companies in the world for it is actually in the States and Israel. Israel has one of the biggest stakes in 3D printing because of the West Bank. Wow. Because they actually have invested heavily in like 3D printing structures, 3D printing homes, like that kind of technology inside of 3D printing. It's an interesting, you know what I mean? Like there's a political backing for that one.
Oh, 100%. We won't get into that right now, but yeah. It's
all of our materials come from Israel.
Right.
Hey-o.
That's very cool. Okay.
Maybe that one didn't call for that.
Yeah, we didn't call for a hey-o.
That wasn't the time for that.
No, I don't think so.
But yeah, other than that, what else is there? 3D scanning is a big one that complements printing as well. Because you were talking about scanners that were...
Yeah, I feel like that's what I was trying to say, but wasn't articulating quite well.
Gotcha. Yeah, so to my knowledge, those are two completely different products, different industries.
Okay, so it's the Control V versus the Control P then.
Yes. Yeah.
So Artie, understand this with me and Darcy. We cannot articulate ourselves well. So you have to understand as a guest.
You're gonna have to
be articulate. I just have to understand.
You just have to understand what the fuck I'm talking about, because like, me monkey, talk science. Fuck, like all these things that you're saying, like little, all sparks going on in my brain. No, I can watch it again. That's fine. Don't worry about it. What do you specifically do, Artie? In what do you do as like with your job? Let's start with that.
Cool. Could I share my screen? I could give you a quick 10-second spiel.
You may be able to turn and show us your screen. Yeah, you can do whatever you want, man. I like that you're growing your beard. They're very, very nice.
Yes.
Cool.
All thanks to you. So this is my website, hobdendesign.com. Essentially, I'm the guy who takes your napkin drawing and gives you CAD files and prototype-ready pieces for production. So
Cool.
I do like concept sketching, sort of CAD design, photo rendering as well. If you want to have like nice pictures for a marketing campaign, or you need to get some investors on board, you're shopping the idea around. All of this can happen fairly quickly in the beginning stages. Initial production drawings as well to help you with sourcing that initial manufacturer or someone you want to engage with. No one will want to talk to you if you don't have files or drawings, but if you have everything ready and just ask for a quote, they're happy. So 3D scanning and 3D print design, of course, we were talking about, prototyping results from that directly, and then art and illustration, even, and consulting. One day I hope to have music on here too. But
yeah, it's all one, man.
It's all one.
It never occurred for me to ask this before, but you must have a lot of shoehorns, huh?
Shoehorns? What does that mean?
Oh, I mean, I've never seen a shoehorn that didn't look like it was 3D printed. So.
Oh. I haven't printed a shoehorn, I could say, but they probably use them for casting and stuff.
Well, I was gonna say, like, that would be the first thing I printed. I mean, nothing feels better than just a slip in
shoehorn, maybe from 3D scan data. Yeah.
Fingers are so passe. Why are we using our fingers to put our shoes on?
Horn it in.
Horn it in, baby.
It's a phrase I live by.
St. Louis shoehorns. Come get them.
Funny.
We'll
I've just worked on medical stuff like this. You were talking about applications for molding earlier, right? Like there's.
Yeah, I was.
Yeah, so like the medical molding, so being able to take anatomical data, printing out maybe one blank, and then being able to like mold the application, or taking a scan of someone to get like a better shape or fit for a prosthetic. And then just the whole process therein of what you go through to get to some sort of end result prototype kind of thing. Wow. Yeah, so medical design was one, and then the other one, of course, we were talking about was there we go, films and prop. So I might be able to show you one or two little bits here.
I like that second one. That looks.
Yeah, that was. Remember that one?
Oh, that was when we went. Which party was this? This was the
Halloween party, right? We went.
Was it the Electric Universe party?
Yeah.
Arthur, Maria, and Richie went down for Electric Universe, and we partied like it was going out of fashion. Woo!
Yeah. So 3D scanning our faces and 3D printing the masks that fit perfectly with little loops for your, glow sticks. That was a fun project. But yeah, like films and prop especially love this kind of medium.
I like that. I like that mask that you have on there. Very cool.
I forget what that was from.
Oh, it's a movie mask, yeah?
Yeah, it is. It's from like 12 Monkeys or something, I think. This is the Star Trek Discovery chest piece they printed. They 3D printed all the different padding for it.
Cool.
Yeah, just, you'll recognize a few things here or there.
Yeah.
But anyway, so like what I do is I service people in sort of a creative endeavor for initial prototyping, and 3D printing has been a mainstay in my service offering for a long time because of just how quick and versatile it is for all these different industries to jump on.
Oh, okay.
So
that's interesting.
Hey, what? We're back. So you know what? My mind's definitely been open to, like I said, I was just fixated on shoehorns. Now I'm thinking of all the cool other things that I could possibly have, like a Daft Punk mask, or like the Lynx shield, or you got options. Like it's
there's a Lynx shield and a Master Sword in my boss's office.
Dope. Boss sounds like a cool guy.
Yeah, 3D printed everything at this point. But yeah, if you guys want to like ever get in, like a really good printer recommendation I'd give you is an Ender 3. Those printers are like, they're about $250, $300, and they're one of the best, hobby level introductory printers out there. Very bare bones, very honest. So an Ender, the Creality Ender 3.
Ender 3 Pro.
Yeah.
Perfect. That's just for our viewers and listeners.
Yeah.
The Ender 3.
Well, I don't know if Yohan had mentioned it, but I'm actually legit in the market to buy one. I'm so like, I don't know if this might make a big deal, or like, I'm actually starting a nonprofit, and I'm like, the idea would be to print these keychains, and that I'd sell them on my website, and that the money would go to feed children and for breakfast.
Very interesting. Well, maybe now might be.
You're going to 3D print keychains to sell
and
to
all
serve
the profits
somebody
go
breakfast,
to
like all the
not one person. In fact, children
well,
aren't
not
people;
one
it's
person.
children.
Children, sure, okay. I'm not being,
I don't like your
you know,
tone.
insensitive or anything, but I was just asking, just fucking clarify. I just wanted to know the process. You're going to get 3D printer, then you're going to print some keychains, then you're going to sell the keychains for
Probably $2,
food,
$3.
$2-3, right? For food that you're going to, breakfast food, one of my favorite foods, that
Well,
you're
that's the
going to be,
cost.
well, yeah, but you're going to be taking that food and you're going to be giving that food to who?
Children in schools, mostly in the local schools in my district, and hopefully, if kids are hungry other places and it goes well, I'll be able to feed them too.
I'm hungry. Give me some food right now.
Okay.
You're a big kid,
I'm always
Yohan.
hungry. I'm a big fat kid and I want to eat all the time, baby.
Yeah, a little husky kid. He was pushing kids off the. He was
Hey,
pushing kids off the monkey bars earlier. I saw him.
Husky is way too far now. All right. Hey.
Whoa,
bro. God,
We should try talking about production hurdles with 3D printing after that.
Okay.
Because I feel like that needs to be mentioned now.
Production hurdles. Now, when you say production hurdles, do you mean snags that you can have on the way that you want to make better and then move on? And
No, it's the inherent shortfalls of the genre of production. So every genre of production is suitable for a specific type of thing. Sheet metal's great, but you can only bend 90 degrees and have flat paneling. You can't get concave surfaces, right? And then you got to go to blow molding. Blow molding is great, but you can't do that in wood, for example. So wood goes into construction design, which is great, but that's not great for. So 3D printing's main shortfall is that to produce one part in 3D printed plastic requires 200 times the amount of energy it would have costed you to just injection mold that, and it takes you like 2,000% times more time to produce that. So think about running.
You said you're a salesman. I mean, I'm kind of weird now.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying. So once you know what your application is, it's great. But to print a part about the size of my fist would take about 5 hours. And it's essentially running a hot glue gun for 5 hours. So imagine that heat consumption versus.
So something roughly this thin and this size. I don't know if people could see that. Don't even work.
Yeah, that would probably take you 40 minutes or so.
Well, I mean, all right. So I don't know, and roughly how much material? Like $40 worth of material to print a $2.
No, that would be it would be 40 minutes worth of a print, probably in 2 cents worth of cheap plastic. But
that's what I'm talking about.
But it's just the sheer energy consumption and the time spent, because if
it's not.
And then on top of that, your failure rate with this technology is high. It's like 40%. Half the time your prints are failing because of just one thing or another. Which is, that's the shortfall of it, is that it gets you a part much quicker than traditional rapid prototyping rounds would do. So it's great in that application. But whenever it runs up against mass manufacturing and production of parts, it never wins, because the energy and the time involved just to get one part never can exceed what mass production has achieved.
Interesting.
All right, so the Ender 3 Pro is a good start, but don't check out other options too. Then
no, that's every printer ever. That's like this.
Okay.
It's like the entire.
All right, fair enough.
Yeah.
All right.
Y'all first generation shit ones right now. We have to wait for another 100 years so we can get the most amazing 3D sharp printer. Basically. Yeah. Right, Artie?
Well, I'll be asking you for recommendations on refurbished ones too. I mean, you can't really find them in pawn shops, or maybe you can, but
never do it. Never do it.
Yeah.
Because half of the ones that are on sale right now that people are trying to make a money on are the ones that were dead door weights before they even made it to market.
Oh, geez.
There's more than a few out there which are just outright absolute crimes of a product that never worked out of the box. The company had to discontinue service and support 3 weeks after release because it didn't work out of the box. And to this day, there's still some on the market because people are trying to convince others to buy them. So be careful.
All right, perfect. Wild West industry for sure.
Yeah.
So we're still in the first generation of 3D printing, you'd say? Is that
No, I'd say we're late beginner, early intermediate phase at this point. Like the adoption rate's getting good. Industry is adopting it, and certifications from industry are pouring in. Medicine's taking it on. Like the
Cool.
industry is going to swell in size. It's a huge amount of it's going to swell by like $8 billion in the next 6 years in terms of the output in 3D printing. Like it's huge. It's gonna,
Eight
you know,
billion.
yeah,
That's
like
with a
it's
B.
just climbing, right? Yeah, that was before COVID, of course. Who knows what happened now? But it was only taking more and more market share and has been exploding exponentially.
This has come to the end of our podcast with Darcy having to leave because his phone overheated. Thank you, Google. Again, could have just got an Apple phone. Anyway, thank you for being on our podcast. I know we got cut short over there, but we can do another session, talk a lot more about 3D printing. And actually, people, you should also know Arthur is an extremely talented musician. He's been classically trained. We're going to have another session with him just specifically on classic music and the evolution of it and where it is today. And if you guys want us to have another talk on 3D printing, which I think we will, because I don't want to say this one got cut short, but I'm sure Arthur has a lot more things to say about it and show us as well.
Yeah, I'd love to show you the design process because that's where people really get excited is how can I design? How can I use this technology?
Exactly. And that's what we want our viewers and our listeners and everybody to know, how they can use 3D printing in their daily lives, how they can pretty much do anything in their daily lives with a 3D printer and how it can enhance it and make it better. Yeah.
Sweet.
So
let's
thank you
do the
so
next
much
one.
for listening. And we're going to talk to you guys soon. Love and peace from We Are in Space. Have a good one, guys.
Signing off.